right. So we have a little lull here between movies that I really want to see and review. I'm just not going to be that guy that sees and reviews every movie. There are hundreds of people, thousands of people that do that. Everyone and their mom is doing that these days. I'm not really interested in that anymore. I'm kind of trying to do my own thing. I'm only going to see movies and review movies that I want to see and review. So, trying to think of kind of something else to do, some more interesting stuff while I'm deciding what my next big video essay is going to be. And I thought I could talk about my favorite movie franchises. I thought that'd be fun. So, before we get into this, I have a few caveats. First of all, when I say franchise, I mean more than 3 movies because 3 is a trilogy and a continuous series of movies. Like, I'm not counting the Batman franchise, including all of the Batman iterations. I'm not counting that. Each individual iteration of Batman counts. So, like, the Burton and Schumacher ones count because that's 4 movies, although, spoiler, they're not going to be on this list. The Dark Knight trilogy would not count because that's a trilogy. So, that will be talked about, obviously, when I do my trilogy video, which will be a separate thing. So, more than 3 movies, and it's got to be, like, one continuation. So, it also, like, Marvel or DC, all encompassing, does not count as a franchise to me. If you want to call it something else, a series, sure, fine. I'm just telling you how I define it. There can be trilogies within franchises, like MCU is a franchise. There's like the Captain American trilogy and Iron Man trilogy and Spider-Man trilogy within that, and I'll talk about the franchise here and possibly the trilogies and the trilogy video. Same with Star Wars. So hopefully that makes sense. Another thing is, obviously, I haven't seen every single movie and every single big franchise, and I'm not going to include a franchise on this list unless I have seen all of the movies. So there are definitely, I am a big horror fan, but there are some horror franchises where I just haven't seen every movie, and I'm not entirely sure I want to, and maybe I will eventually, but if something's left off, either that's the reason why, or I just don't like the movies in the franchise enough to be included in this list. And the last thing that I'll say that I feel like I shouldn't have to say before I do these ranking videos, but I'm going to do it every single time, and that's that this is just my opinion. This is my personal favorite movie franchises. Of course, yours are going to be different. I would love to see what your favorite franchises are. Drop a comment below, and let's start a conversation about it. Okay, with all that being said, I have 3 honorable mentions. These are franchises that I wanted to mention, but couldn't really include them in my top 10. The first one is going to be Harry Potter. Now, I know this is sacrilege to a lot of people that it's not in my top 10. And let me just say, I don't have any nostalgia for these movies because I didn't watch them growing up, aside from the first 2, which honestly, in my opinion, are the worst ones. I only watched all of the rest of them for the first time about a couple years ago. So I don't have that nostalgia whatsoever. I don't really have that connection to these movies like I do with some of these other franchises that will be on this list. And as far as the movies themselves, I think they're just fine. I mean, I think only one of them is great, and that is Prisoner of Azkaban. The rest, I think, are decent to good. So the overall quality and the batting average of the franchise is really good. The movies are, for the most part, pretty good. I just don't ever really find myself coming back to them, and I don't have that same connection to them like a lot of people do, or as I do with other franchises. I forgot to mention in the preamble that my criteria for this is going to be kind of multiple different things. One of them is just my overall connection to these movies, how much I want to watch them, how much I think about them, rewatchability, nostalgia. Those are huge things. And then also just kind of the overall quality and the batting average as far as just in a hit or miss world, like how many of the movies in the franchise hit. So there's kind of a lot of different things that go into how I rank these franchises. So because of Harry Potter, I don't have that connection to it like a lot of people do. I don't really want to rewatch it very often. That's why it's not in my top 10, despite the fact that it has a really good batting average. My next honorable mention is going to be the Terminator franchise. Now, this is a very tough one for me because While the first two movies are absolutely fantastic, I mean, they are two of the, I think, 11 movies I've ever given 5 stars on Letterboxd. Just incredible movies, basically perfect. I do not like any other movie in this franchise. I mean, 3 is awful. Salvation has a few redeeming qualities. There's some interesting ideas in there, but execution, not good. Genesis, I actually enjoy a little bit more than most people, but also incredibly flawed, and I don't like Dark Fate at all. And the more I think about it, the more time goes by, the less I like that movie. So I can't really put a franchise that is 2 for 6 in the top 10 because no matter how good those two movies are, that is a really bad batting average, and there hasn't been a good one since 1991 when T2 came out. So I just can't, in good conscience, put the Terminator franchise in my top 10. Although I really do love the Sarah Connor Chronicles TV series, although I can't really include that in this. So I'm really disappointed it got canceled. But anyway, yeah, Terminator is an honorable mention. And my third and final honorable mention is going to be the Alien franchise. This falls into basically the same category as the Terminator franchise in that the first two are amazing. The original Alien is a classic sci-fi horror movie that is a masterclass in atmosphere and building tension. And Aliens is a great follow-up that I even slightly prefer to the first. It's more of an action movie, bit faster pacing and better character development while also maintaining some of those horror elements. Unfortunately, this franchise fell off a fucking cliff after Aliens, even worse than Terminator did, in my opinion. I absolutely despise Alien 3. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's probably the movie that pisses me off the most because of the decision they made in the opening 10 minutes to kill off Hicks and Newt in the worst way possible for no good reason. And on top of that, the rest of the movie is just bland. Resurrection is god-awful. It might be even worse than Alien 3. The alien-human hybrid thing is one of the worst things I've ever seen. It is a tonal mess. That so-called Ripley that we get does not resemble Ripley at all, except for the fact that she looks like her. Really, really despise that movie. And then Prometheus and Covenant. Look, Ridley Scott did what he wanted to do with those movies, and a lot of people appreciate them. I'm not one of them. I find them incredibly boring and pretentious and not a direction I wanted the Alien franchise to go whatsoever. If you wanted to explore this stuff, call it something else. Don't tease people that these are Alien prequels and mostly do an entirely different thing with them. Even though Fassbender was great in those movies, just really do not like them. I have high hopes for Alien Romulus because I do like Fede Alvarez a lot and it's got a good cast. So, and I think it's picking up right after the first one, which is interesting because that's decanonizing Aliens, or I guess, no, it's not necessarily. It's just, it takes place before it, I guess, hopefully. So I hope they don't decanonize Aliens because it's really damn good. If they decanonized everything after Aliens, that would be awesome. But considering Ridley Scott made Covenant and Prometheus, I doubt that's going to happen. So again, despite the fact that the first two are amazing, another franchise that is 2 for 6, so I just can't include it in my top 10. Cracking the actual top 10 is going to be the Mad Max franchise. Now, this one is interesting to me because I think the first two are really good. I think the first Mad Max is a very compelling and entertaining, gritty movie. I think that Road Warrior, which is what it was originally called, now it's called Mad Max 2, I believe, in the States, which is really stupid. I always call it Road Warrior. That one, to me, was an improvement on the first. It did everything the first one did. It kept that similar tone and grittiness and expanded upon it and had some good character development and high stakes and a cool villain in Lord Humongous. So I really love Road Warrior. That's my favorite one in the franchise. Beyond Thunderdome stinks. It's a bad movie. I don't ever really want to rewatch that again. They got the tone totally wrong. Fury Road, and I am not going to say too much about this movie in this video because I also have a top 10 hottest takes video planned. And no, I'm not copying Cody Leach. Believe me, I had it in mind long before he posted his. I got my list ongoing. But I'm not as high on Fury Road, not nearly as high on Fury Road as most people. So for that reason, honestly, this franchise would have been higher on this list if I loved Fury Road to the level that most people do, because then it would be basically 3 for 4 with 3 home runs for me. But instead, they're like 2.5 for 4. I think that the technical aspects of Fury Road are great. It's a marvel to look at. Everything else, not so good. And I'll get deeper into that in my hot takes video. But for that reason, it is number 10 and not higher. But I really, really do love those first 2 movies. Number 9 is going to be the Fast and Furious franchise. I have an interesting relationship with this franchise because if this was the Paul Walker era, excluding the 2 newest movies and excluding Tokyo Drift, just including every movie with Paul Walker in it, this franchise would be much higher on this list. But because it's kind of fallen off a little bit, I don't really like Dom as the main character. I think it's more interesting when Brian is the main character, just like we had in the first movie, and that's what makes the first one so good. It has really grown on me over the years. It is my second favorite in the franchise behind Fast 5, and it is really close to being number 1. That one just keeps getting better and better. The more I think about it, the more I watch it. It has aged really well. To me, it is the better version of Point Break. Yeah, I said it. And I like Point Break too, but I think that Brian O'Connor is a more compelling character than Johnny Utah. So just going to get that out of the way. And I enjoy Too Fast, Too Furious a lot more than most people. I think it's really underrated. I love the chemistry between Paul Walker and Tyrese. Don't care for Tokyo Drift. That's kind of the black sheep of the franchise. I know people have kind of come around to it over the years. I'm not one of them. The soundtrack is cool. Everything else, not so much. I really don't like the main character. I'm not a fan of the gimmick of drifting. I don't think really lends itself to an entire movie. Everything 4 through 6 really enjoy. And 4 is another one that has grown on me throughout the years. 7, I think, is a great send-off for Paul Walker, but the movie itself is a bit messy because of what happened. It's not really their fault. They did the best with the terrible hand that they were dealt, but it definitely is a pretty messy and overlong movie, and I start to suffer from action fatigue, which is also something that I got in 9 and 10 as well. I actually quite enjoy Hobbs and Shaw and Fate of the Furious. I think that Fate of the Furious was actually an improvement over 7. 9 I despise. I mean, that movie is fucking mind-numbing. 10 I thought was a slight improvement, which is not a high bar to clear, but I enjoyed it mostly because of Jason Momoa's villain. By far and away the best villain in the franchise to me. I thought he was so awesome and charismatic and weird. Absolutely loved him. The rest of the movie, not so good. Kind of typical of what we've gotten over the last couple Fast movies. But I am, for the first time in a long time, mildly interested in where this franchise is going. So again, if it was just the Paul Walker era, it would be quite a bit higher. It's gotten dragged down a little bit after the last couple movies, but this is a franchise that for the most part I have really enjoyed. Coming in at number 8 is going to be the Predator franchise. Now, the reason I have Predator in here and not Alien is that the Predator franchise to me is 4 for 5, and the one movie that missed, the Predator, the Shane Black one, I don't hate it to the level that most people do. Now, it's not a good movie, don't get me wrong. It's very, very messy, but I actually quite enjoyed the first act to the first half of the movie. Once the CGI Predator came into play, it kind of all went downhill from there, but I thought there was some enjoyment to be had with the original Predator, and I actually quite enjoyed the group dynamic of the characters. I bought into it. Again, total mess after that. They kill off like the main human villain in a blink and you miss it moment. It was really weird, very choppy editing. I don't really understand what happened there. I don't know if we'll ever know fully the story of the behind the scenes, how everything played out on that movie. Certainly could have been a lot better than it was, and definitely my least favorite. Well, I don't know if it's my least favorite Shane Black movie. I don't like Iron Man 3 either. I'll get to that a little bit more on this list. But the first Predator is a perfect sci-fi action horror movie to me, and it blends those 3 genres extremely well. I think the Predator is a really cool villain. I really liked Arnold's main character. And then Prey, which is my second favorite in the franchise, not by much. It's almost first. was a fantastic return to form to where it felt enough like the original. It went back down to basics, so it gave us that feeling of the original movie, the smaller scale, just kind of keeping it simple. But it also modernized itself, and it took place in a different timeline. It took place in a long time ago, and we got a brand new main character who's by far and away, to me, the best main character in this entire franchise. Has a really interesting arc, similar to Dutch's arc in the first movie, but even more fleshed out. It's gnarly. I love that version of the Predator, kind of a more inexperienced one. It looks gorgeous, especially the snow scene. The score is great. It's got a great atmosphere and tension. So that was a perfect way to bring this franchise back. I'm hoping that Alien Romulus does a similar thing for the Alien franchise. And then Predator 2, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I think it's a pretty fun movie. It's goofy. It's very flawed, but I always have fun with it whenever I watch it. And then Predators is one that has really grown on me over the years. I remember not being a huge fan when I first watched it. Kind of felt like a rehash of the first, and that is still sort of a criticism of mine, which is interesting. The Predators feels more like a rehash than Prey does, although on paper Prey should be more of one, but Predator feels more like a rehash. But, I enjoy it every time I watch it. I think it's a very entertaining movie. I like all the different Predators, and they're kind of feuding with each other, and the cast is pretty good. I mix on Adrian Brody. I think he's a good actor, but probably not the right choice for this role. At least he didn't have to do the Batman voice. So the Predator franchise is one that I, for the most part, really enjoy. I absolutely love the first one, and Prey, quite enjoy too. And Predators and The Predator I don't like, but I'm not quite as down on it as most people. I certainly like it more than any of the Alien sequels after Aliens. And just so you guys know, I'm not including the AVP movies in either of these franchises because they're not canon. Although I do have a good enough time with the first AVP movie. I wish it was rated R. Second one is just god-awful. You can't see a goddamn thing that's going on, and they go a little too far with some of the stuff that they do. It just feels really, really gross in the wrong way. So but those movies aren't canon, so those are not included in here. So Predator franchise, I quite enjoy a lot more than the Alien franchise, because to me it has a much better batting average. It didn't quite fall off the cliff like the Alien franchise did, and it really, really came back to form with Prey. Number 7 is going to be the Lethal Weapon franchise. These movies, as far as I'm concerned, are 4 for 4. Now, there is a little bit of diminishing returns with these types of movies. However, they kind of mitigate that in this franchise with the introduction of Joe Pesci's Leo Getz in the second movie. Okay. And then we get Chris Rock and Jet Li in 4. So I think they find ways to keep this franchise fresh, but keep it ultimately focused on the relationship between the two main characters in Riggs, played by Mel Gibson, and Murtaugh, played by Danny Glover. I just love their dynamic. I love those two characters. I mean, Lethal Weapon has got to be the best buddy cop franchise of all time. I mean, I don't know what else it would be. Rush Hour is only a trilogy, but I think Lethal Weapon is better anyway. First movie is really good. Second's really good. 3 and 4 are a bit of a step down, but again, 4 kind of adds like a different feel, adds some new characters, so I always have a ton of fun with that one. 3 is probably the worst one of the 4, but still quite enjoyable. So this is a franchise that I really enjoy. I haven't watched them in a while, but I think I used to have the DVD with all 4 of the movies on one DVD, which is pretty cool. I might need to upgrade that. I don't know if they're on 4K, or if not, I'll probably get the Blu-rays. But wait, maybe I did. Maybe I do have a 4K collection. I'm not sure. Anyway, Lethal Weapon is a franchise that I always have a ton of fun with. Really love these characters. Interesting plots. So a franchise that will never get old to me. Number 6 is going to be the Rocky franchise. This franchise is... there's only one miss in there, and that is Rocky 5, which is just god-awful, a total misfire on every level, and most people seem to agree on that. However, every other movie in this franchise is either pretty enjoyable to really, really good. I mean, I love the first Rocky, and that is one that I appreciate more and more over the years. It is just such a good underdog story. and Carl Weathers brings so much life to Apollo Creed. Sylvester Stallone was the perfect choice for Rocky. I love that he was able to cast himself in the role. Just the behind the scenes stuff, as far as how that movie came to be, is really, really cool. The first two Creeds, I think, are also fantastic. Creed 3, I like, don't love. Michael B. Jordan, I think, did a really good job with the directing, but I do not like the style of the fight. I don't like the anime kind of style that he goes for, and he absolutely accomplished what he was trying to do, and I commend him for that, and a lot of people really like it. Just is not for me whatsoever. I like all the other fights in the franchise where it's more grounded and we're actually seeing what's going on. That style did not work for me at all. But aside from that, I did enjoy the movie quite a bit, despite the lack of Sylvester Stallone and him not being there. His presence was definitely missed. As far as the rest of the movies in the franchise, quite enjoy 3. I enjoy 4, even though it's not really a movie. It's kind of just a long montage of music videos, but that's part of what makes it so enjoyable. So I get really invested in Rocky and all of the people around him. There's some good villains in this franchise. I think Balboa was a really good return to form after Rocky 5, and if that was the end of the franchise, I would have been totally okay with it. I was skeptical about going forward with Creed, but I'm glad they did it because, man, those movies are really, really good. So Rocky is a franchise that has been pretty consistently good to great throughout the years, aside from that one misstep in Rocky 5, so it comes in at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is going to be the Toy Story franchise. It is now a franchise because there are 4 movies. Now, you can probably say that the first 3 movies are the Andy trilogy, and maybe that will come up in my trilogy video, but the whole thing is definitely a franchise. And I was skeptical about continuing the Toy Story movies after the first 3. I thought 3 was a perfect ending, but I think that 4 was actually really good, and they did a really good job justifying its existence. And I was like, oh, okay, I understand why they did another one. I get what they're doing here. 3 was the end of Andy's story, but there was more to do with Woody in 4, and I thought they did a really good job with that, despite the fact that they did sideline the other characters a little bit. The first 2 are definitely the best to me. The second movie was one of the first movies I ever saw in theaters. At least it might be the first one that I actually remember seeing in theaters. That opening scene, the video game stuff, was just so damn cool. That will be ingrained in my brain forever. That is my favorite in the franchise. It's just so damn memorable to me. Like, every single scene has a purpose and sticks in my mind throughout all these years. The first one is fantastic as well. Great story. Woody and Buzz are like 2 of the best fictional characters ever created. I had their toys, and I also had Slinky and Ham and Mr. Potato Head. I had like all the toys. I was obsessed with the Toy Story movies. Those first 2 just have a special place in my heart. Now, 3 and 4, I think, are both really good in their own right, but they don't have that same effect on me as the first 2, which makes sense because I was, when 3 came out, I was a teenager, but I didn't even see it when it first came out. I didn't end up watching it until almost before 4 came out. So those 2, I don't really have the connection to that I do the first 2 or any nostalgia for them. But man, those first 2 are absolutely special. Coming in at number 4 is going to be my favorite horror franchise by a large margin, and that is the Scream franchise. I am a Scream fanboy, and the movies have aged really, really well. Almost all of them get better each time I watch them, especially the first one. I liked it the first time I watched it, but that is a movie that the more I watch it, the more I think about it, the more time goes by, the more I love it, to the point where it's become like one of my favorite movies of all time now. It is just so damn good. It balances real, genuine terror with the satirical stuff in the perfect way. It's incredibly entertaining, incredibly rewatchable. Got great tension, and the social commentary is great. Has some of the best characters ever created, and I get so invested in them every single time I watch through this franchise, which is like every year, and these movies never get old to me. 3 is the only one I don't like. I think it has enjoyable elements to it, but it's got by far and away the weakest new cast of characters, and Sydney isn't even in the movie for the most part until like the third act. It also has my least favorite villain. So I think they went too far into the comedic realm, whereas I think all the other movies in the franchise balance it really well. 3 almost becomes like a parody of itself, almost more like a scary movie. But the rest, I mean, I really enjoy the new ones with 5 and 6. I think they're really entertaining, and 5 in particular had really good social commentary and good killers. 6 had fantastic atmosphere, and it was definitely the scariest one in the franchise. I think they utilized the New York setting really well. The subway scene is really well done. There's some gnarly kills in there. The thing that brings 6 down a little bit is I did not like the killer reveals and motive whatsoever. But aside from that, really enjoyed it. 4, I think, is really, really underrated. Probably the most underrated movie in the franchise. I think that one is also really intense and might do the whodunit aspect better than any other movie in the franchise, and has one of the best and most surprising killers in the franchise. I'm doing the best I can to not spoil these movies. So I don't believe I've spoiled the Scream ones yet. I have not gotten specific. So sorry if I did, but I'm trying really hard not to. 2, I think, is slightly overrated, but I don't like those killers as much as most people, but I think it's still damn enjoyable. So Scream is a franchise that I am constantly thinking about, constantly wanting to rewatch, constantly watching scenes from, constantly listening to the scores and soundtracks from them. Love the characters so much. I got a picture with Neve Campbell, Matthew Lillard, Skeet Ulrich, and Jamie Kennedy from MegaCon last year, with my brother and sister, which was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. So as far as like the average overall quality, like out of 10, it might not be the best, but these movies continue to be entertaining. And there is, again, as far as I'm concerned, there's really only one that missed. And I have this connection to the Scream movies that I don't have with a lot of the franchises that are below this, even though they might have technically like a higher average rating. This might have been even higher if it wasn't for the stuff that went down with Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. I completely support them. I think what happened was BS, and obviously Jenna didn't leave because of scheduling conflicts. I mean, come on, look at the timing. There wasn't even a script or shooting schedule yet. We all know what happened there. So if somehow they end up coming back, I will be ecstatic. If not, I will not be watching Scream 7. So as far as I'm concerned, it ended after 6. If another studio acquires it, I'll consider it. But if it is still Spyglass without Melissa and Jenna, no chance. Sorry. So if it weren't for that, it might be even higher, because that has soured me a little bit. But I still really love this franchise and enjoy the hell out of 5 out of the 6 movies. And I think it's one of the most influential and revolutionary franchises, especially horror franchises of all time. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Mission Impossible. This franchise has really risen in the ranks for me over the last few years, because up until pre-Dead Reckoning coming out, I had not even seen like half of the movies. I had only seen the first one, which had been a really long time, but I remembered really fondly. And I'd also seen the last 2 before Dead Reckoning. So I'd also seen Rogue Nation and Fallout, which I also really like those. Fallout was one of my favorite action movies of all time and still is. And Dead Reckoning, to me, passed it up just a little bit. I mean, I am obsessed with Dead Reckoning. I rewatch it constantly. I think about it constantly. I listen to the score from Lauren Balfe, which is fantastic. Especially, I Was Hoping to Be You, just so, so good. The only bad movie in this franchise, and I did end up watching 2, 3, and 4 for the first time prior to the release of Dead Reckoning. The only bad one is 2. I think it's just a weird movie, and John Woo's style just did not fit for it whatsoever. It's way too stretched out. But all the other ones, I honestly think are really good. I think the first one is particularly underrated. I think because of how bombastic the franchise got with the action, people overlook and underrate the first one. I think it's It's not really an action movie. It's more like a spy thriller, but it's a really good one at that. 3, I think, is also great, has the best villain in the franchise with Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. That opening scene, holy shit, man. Ghost Protocol, I think, is maybe slightly overrated. It tends to be a lot of people's favorite, which I don't quite get. Has fantastic stunts, but the villain is incredibly forgettable, and so is the story. Rogue Nation, very, very enjoyable. We get the introduction to Ilsa Faust, and then, like I said, Fallout and Dead Reckoning are absolutely fantastic. What sets these movies apart to me from like all of the other action franchises, like why I much prefer these to the John Wick movies, is multiple reasons. First of all, I love Keanu. I do. I think he's a great guy, and has nothing to do with the person off camera. But Tom Cruise is a way better actor than Keanu is, and because of that, he's able to bring a lot more layers to Ethan Hunt than we ever get with John Wick. And I think the plots are more intricate and compelling. They're definitely complex, but not to the point where you can't follow them. I think that they toe that line perfectly, and the stakes feel real. The characters actually feel like they're in danger. And the action, I think, has a lot more variety to it. They're constantly doing different things throughout the movies. It never gets stale, which, like, for John Wick, to me, does. It becomes visual noise because they're kind of doing the same thing over and over, and there are no stakes. I never feel that with Mission Impossible. And they're constantly introducing fun new characters. I love the introduction to Haley Atwell in Dead Reckoning. There's a lot of twists throughout the franchise, so I am incredibly invested. I enjoy the hell out of every single one of these movies, again, besides 2, and I can't wait to see where they go with the next one. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Star Wars. Of course, you knew this was going to be on this list. Now, look, as far as the average rating goes, Star Wars is definitely not number 2, but I just have such a connection to Star Wars, and it's just such a magical, expansive universe that I have to have it this high. I don't like the sequel trilogy. I really love The Force Awakens on its own. I think it's a great return to form, feels a bit derivative of A New Hope, but I honestly slightly prefer it. It's an incredibly rewatchable movie. I saw it 5 times in theaters, which is still my record. Last Jedi, I'm very mixed on, and that has gone down for me throughout the years. I despise Rise of Skywalker, and then as a trilogy, it doesn't really make any sense. It's very, very incoherent. It's very obvious they didn't have a plan. However, the Lucas era, I really, really dig, and in particular, the prequels, I find to be very underrated. I think they get way too much hate. People have sort of come around to them throughout the years, especially after the release of the sequel trilogy, and now we see what a trilogy with no plan and competing visions looks like. People have appreciated the prequels more because despite the issues with some of the specific execution with the dialogue and the pacing and stuff like that, they tell a very compelling and coherent story, even more so than the original trilogy, I would say. The story of the rise of Palpatine, the fall and turn of Anakin Skywalker, and the demise of the Jedi, I think was extremely well done, and the prequels have, by far and away, the best musical scores of the entire franchise. Again, the original has great scores as well. John Williams is an absolute legend, but I think his work in the prequels was probably his best of all time. In particular, Duel of the Fates and Across the Stars are just so damn good and capture those emotions perfectly. Acting, dialogue, I think it's mostly the dialogue. Lucas is not good at dialogue. He should have gotten someone in there to touch it up. But just a very cool world, very expansive world, and the prequels tell a really, really good story, despite the fact that some of the execution wasn't the best. In the original trilogy, of course, everyone loves that. Empire, in particular, I think is basically a perfect movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I got to see it in a drive-in during the COVID year in 2020 when they turned a baseball field into a drive-in. sound wasn't really very good. We didn't have the radio thing, but it was still pretty cool. And this is a movie that I can watch over and over. I am actually not quite as high on both A New Hope and Return of the Jedi as most people, but I get why people love them, and I do like them. And I think the original trilogy overall is great and tells a great story. And Return of the Jedi, despite my issues with it, has a fantastic ending. And of course, you also have, I'm not including, this is the movie franchise, but you also have like the video games and stuff and the shows. And while those technically don't count for this ranking, when I think about Star Wars, it's hard not to think about all that stuff because the world is so vast. And I'm so thankful that George Lucas created this thing because I don't know what I would do without it. I could almost argue that the Clone Wars micro series counts as a movie. I mean, it is basically a 2-hour movie. We can have that debate, but honestly, I think it's fair to include it. So as someone who does not care for the sequel trilogy aside from The Force Awakens, I really, really like the prequels, and I have a prequel defense video planned that's probably going to come out around the time they re-release The Phantom Menace. So I'm going to take all this time between now and then to work on that. That's going to take a ton of work. It's going to be really long, but man, it is going to be good and a lot of fun. So Star Wars comes in at my second favorite movie franchise. But number one, of course, is the MCU. Despite the fact that they have fallen off a little bit over the last few years, I am not in the camp that the MCU is dead. I have never been in that camp, and I don't hate most of their recent output to the same level that a lot of people do. I'm mixed on a lot of it, but as far as the movies go, and I'm talking movie franchises here, because there are some of the shows I don't like, but as far as the movies go, I've still been positive on every movie that's come out in the last couple phases after the end of the Infinity Saga. Mixed positive on most of them, but still positive. You know, there's a couple gems in there like Shang-Chi and No Way Home. But for the most, and I think Love and Thunder gets way too much hate. Obviously, the Infinity Saga was the best. Phase 3 was incredible. I don't think they'll ever be able to replicate that. They pulled off Infinity War and Endgame so well and exceeded expectations. Winter Soldier, Civil War, Ragnarok, Guardians, also fantastic. The Russo movies, to me, are the best in the franchise, but they have never missed, in my opinion, like as far as a movie that in a thumbs up or thumbs down world, I would give a thumbs down. Aside from Iron Man 3 and Incredible Hulk and Thor the Dark World. So they haven't missed in 10 years, in my opinion. Again, they've gotten a little bit more mixed positive for me lately, but I have some faith that they're going to course correct. They seem to have slowed down their production significantly. Deadpool 3 is going to be the only MCU movie that comes out this year, and I'm really excited for that, just hoping it doesn't become a total cameo fest, but I'm sure it's going to be a ton of fun. Definitely peaked with the Infinity Saga, Infinity War, and Endgame, which were just so incredible. That's definitely lightning in a bottle there. But I'm still very much looking forward to where they go next. I hope they recast Kang soon, because I think a simple, straight-up recast is by far and away the best way to go, and Lakeith Stanfield is my pick. I've heard rumors of Coleman Domingo and John David Washington, who would also be great, so I'm looking forward to see what they do with that, and I am not as down on this franchise as a lot of people seem to be. I've never once said the MCU is dead. I think that's a ridiculous thing to say, and people keep going back and forth. I know you've probably seen the meme to where it's like, MCU's back, MCU's dead, MCU's back, MCU's dead. It's like, guys, you don't have to be on one end of the spectrum or the other. It's a spectrum. There's a lot of room in between. So I'm of the opinion that I'm excited to see where they go next, and it seems like they have course corrected, but I also have been definitely lower on most of their recent stuff than I was in the Infinity Saga, but I don't know if we'll ever be able to recapture that. Still, mostly enjoy their movies and looking forward to where they're going next. So, there you have it, guys. There are my top 10 favorite movie franchises of all time. The way I define franchises, some people define them differently. That is totally fine. And trilogies is going to be a completely separate video that is going to be a lot of fun in its own right. There are a few trilogies that I think I need to watch before I do that video, so I'm not exactly sure when that's going to happen. But what are some of your favorite franchises? Drop a comment below. Let's start a conversation. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Likes are super important for helping me grow my channel, push my videos out to more people. And if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, subscribe, hit the notification bell to get notified when I post a video. Stay tuned. I got some more stuff coming. I'll see you soon.